Burmese literature. Published December the 12th, 2017. Special characters are denoted as follows. And. Beginning and ending single or double quotations. And. Left and right parentheses. An M dash. The literature of Burma, or Myanmar, spans over a millennium. Burmese literature was historically influenced by Indian and Thai cultures, as seen in many works, such as the Ramayana. The Burmese language, unlike other Southeast Asian languages, for example, Thai, Khmer, adopted words primarily from Pali rather than from Sanskrit. In addition, Burmese literature tends to reflect local folklore and culture. Burmese literature has historically been a very important aspect of Burmese life, steeped in the Pali canon of Buddhism. Traditionally, Burmese children were educated by monks in monasteries in towns and villages. During British colonial rule, instruction was formalized and unified, and often bilingual, in both English and Burmese, known as Anglo Vernacular. Burmese literature played a key role in disseminating nationalism among the Burmese during the colonial era, with writers such as Thakin Kodor Main, an outspoken critic of British colonialism in Burma. Beginning soon after self-rule, government censorship in Burma has been heavy, stifling literary expression. Part 1. Classical literature. The earliest forms of Burmese literature were on stone engravings called kyaoksa for memorials or for special occasions such as the building of a temple or a monastery. Later, the palm leaves called pesa, the motor yacht, were used as paper, which resulted in the rounded forms of the Burmese alphabet. During the Bagan dynasty, King Anawrahta adopted Theravada Buddhism as the state religion and brought many Pali texts from Ceylon. These texts were translated, but Pali remained the literary medium of the Burmese kingdom. Furthermore, Pali influenced Burmese language and structure because of literal translations of Pali text called Nisaya, the motor yacht. The earliest works of Burmese literature date from the Bagan dynasty. They include prose recording monarchical merit acts and poetic works, the earliest of which was Yak Hangmin Dami Aigian, Cradle Song of the Princess of Arakan, dated to 1455. During the Bagan and Inward dynasties, two primary types of literature flourished: Morgan, the motor yacht, and Aigian, the motor yacht, and Pio, the motor yacht. Religious works generally derived from the Yat-Auka tales. Non-fiction and religious works prevailed during this period, although Kagian, the motor yacht, a war poem by a monarch, was an early form of this genre in history. As literature grew more liberal and secular, poetry became the most popular form of literature in Burma. The flexibility of the Burmese language, because of its monosyllabic and tonal nature, and its lack of many consonantal finals, allowed poetry to utilize various rhyming schemes. By the 15th century, four primary genres of poetry had emerged, namely Pio, poems based on the Yat-Auka tales, the motor yacht, metaphysical and religious poems, Morgan, historical verses written as a hybrid of epic and ode, and Aigian, lullabies of the royal family. Courtiers also perfected the Mayataza, the motor yacht, a long prose letter. Buddhist monks were also influential in developing Burmese literature. Shinage Hamadi rendered in verse the Yat-Auka stories. During this time, Shin Mahaphiloantha, 1453 to 1520, wrote a chronicle on the history of Buddhism. a contemporary of his, Shinodama Gyor, was famous for his epic verses called Taula, the motor yacht that reveled in the natural beauty of the seasons, forests and travel. Yor Shinritu, a maid of honor, wrote another form of poetry called Ainjin on the 55 styles of hairdressing. After the conquest of Siam by the Taungoo dynasty, Thailand became a Burmese colony. This conquest incorporated many Thai elements into Burmese literature. Most evident were the Yadu or Yatu, the motor yacht, an emotional and philosophic verse, and the Yakan, the motor yacht, which imitated the themes of the Yadu genre, which was more emotionally involved, could be inspired by mood, place, incident, and often addressed to sweethearts and wives. Famous writers of Yadu include Anawrahta, 1545 to 1600, and Prince Nachinorn, 1578 to 1619. Some parts of Laos and Cambodia also became Burmese colonies during Second Burmese Empire and thereby influenced Burmese literature. In the areas of law, there were two major types of literature: Damathat, the motor yacht, which appeared prior to the 13th century, and Shok Tone, the motor yacht, which were compilations of brief accounts of historic cases and events in simple narrative to serve as guides and legal precedents for rulers. As the Konbaung dynasty emerged in the 18th century, the Third Burmese Empire was founded. This era has been dubbed the Golden Age of Literature, after a second conquest of Ayutthaya, Thailand. Many spoils of war were brought to the Burmese court. The Ramayana, the motor yacht, was introduced and was adapted in Burmese. In addition, the Ramayana inspired romantic poems, which became popular literary sojourns among the royal class. Burmese literature during this period was therefore modelled after the Ramayana, and dramatic plays were patronized by the Burmese court. The Burmese adapted Thai verses and created four new classical verses, called Tadat, the motor yacht, Lagyo, the motor yacht, Dwagyo, the motor yacht, and Ball, the motor yacht. Part 1, Classical Literature. Chapter 1, First Printing Press. 1816. The arrival of the first printing press in Burma in 1816, sent by the British Serampore Mission, helped to liberalize centuries-old traditions of writing in verse, lay low the pike. The motor yacht, a poetry type where four-syllable lines are linked in a climbing rhyme and grouped into stanzas of 30 lines. Monks remained powerful in Burmese literature, compiling histories of Burma, Gaigan Shingi, 1757 to 1807. Wrote the Yat Auka tales incorporating Burmese elements, including the Mayataza, Pali, Meta, all of plus Burmese, Sa or letter, which are love letters and are important sources of first-hand accounts of the economic and social changes Burma was undergoing before colonialism. During the First Anglo-Burmese War, 1823 to 1826. More solemn and muted moods exuded from Burmese literature, including lyrical music. In addition, Yazran, historical chronicles, became important in the Konbaung dynasty, although they had been written since the Inwa dynasty. In 1724, Yukala wrote the Mahayazrangai, the Great Chronicles, covering Burmese history until 1711. In 1829, King Bagyado appointed scholars to compile the Mananyasa Indorgi Glass Palace Chronicle, covering Burmese history until 1821. A successor king, King Mindan appointed a committee of Burmese scholars from 1867 to 1869 to create the Dutya Mahayasa Indorgi, the second Great Royal Chronicles. Part 2. British Burma, 1824 to 1948. When Burma became a colony of British India, Burmese literature continued to flourish, even though the institution of the Burmese monarchy, the leading patron of Burmese arts and literature in pre-colonial times, had been dismantled. English literature was still relatively inaccessible, although both English and Burmese, in a curriculum called Anglo-Vernacular, was now taught in schools. Despite the fact that Burmese literature was well entrenched in Burmese culture, the lack of patrons to support literature slowed its further development. The colonial period marked a tremendous change in Burmese literature, which had once been patronized and innovated by members of the royal court, and was now being led by civilians such as university students. In 1910, J.S. Furnivall established the Burma Research Society, which further emboldened the Burmese to protect their literary and cultural heritage. Beginning in the 1920s, a nationalist movement emerged, and this influence became evident in modern novels, short stories, and poems. At the University of Rangoon, student writers continued to develop new forms of Burmese poetry. A major landmark in Burmese literature was called the Kitsan, testing the times. The Motor Yacht movement, a search for a new style and content, led most notably by Thaipan Monwa along with Nuso, Zorgi, Minthu I and Maya K2, while still at university and after, in the decade before the Second World War. During the Kitsan movement, University of Rangoon students innovated new styles of writing, with shorter and clearer sentences, and unadorned prose, a radical transformation from royal writings of the pre-colonial eras beforehand. The movement for independence continued to fuel Burmese literature. Thakin Kodormain was greatly influential in spawning this anti-colonial literature with his powerful Legyo Gai, the Motor Yacht, and Attika, the Motor Yacht. Verses famous for their patriotic and satirical content. Morbius Ayathine was particularly influential, with Bazat Yazarin oral chronicles, which relied on oral tradition. Novels also came into vogue, with the first being James Lakayor's Mornyin Mornami Ma, written in 1904 and inspired by the Count of Monte Cristo. Kalapur Watita, the Motor Yacht. Modern novels became popular during this era, with P. Monin writing the first Burmese novels to focus on the individual and place that character at the center of the plot. Thaipan Monwa and Thine P. Mind were among other original and innovative authors from the colonial period. Female writers, such as Dagon Kinkinley, who wrote about the hardships of peasant life under colonialism, also gained prominence during the nationalist period leading up to independence. The British author George Orwell, who was severely critical of British colonialism, wrote Burmese Days, published in 1935. In addition, literary culture in Burma expanded to the masses during this period, with the arrival of printing presses and publishers, such as the Hanth Hawaii Press, a major publisher of Burmese and Buddhist works established by Philip Ripley. In the 1920s to the 1930s, monthly literary magazines like Dagon and Gandaloka, World of Classics, were published to connect readers to writers, who often published novels and serial installations. Part 3. Post-Independence Literature. 1948. After independence in 1948, Burmese literature developed further to adopt and assimilate Western styles of writing. A year earlier, The Burmese Translation Society, a government-subsidized organization, was founded to translate foreign works, especially those related to the fields of science and technology. In 1963, a year after the socialist coup, the society was merged into the Sapay Bikeman. The Motor Yacht, a government publishing house. Another influential publisher was the Pagan Press. Est. 1962, which translated socialist and Marxist works into Burmese. In 1976, the first Burmese encyclopedia, the Motor Yacht, was published. The socialist government, like the previous civilian government, was a patron of Burmese literature, believing enriching literature to be a goal of socialist democracies, as outlined in the Revolutionary Council's system of correlation of man and his environment. However, censorship and promotion of socialist ideology became important aims of the government in regulating literature, as seen in the reorganization of the Ministry of Information, which censored works according to three primary objectives that aimed to promote socialism. Quote, 1. To introduce necessary bills, acts and orders concerning literature and information agencies. 1. To promote participation of the people in the construction of the socialist state. 1. To defend the socialist system from its ideological enemies. Discussion of the National Literary Conference. Rangoon, Ministry of Information, 1963. Part 3, Post-Independence Literature Chapter 1, Censorship. In 1971, the government formed the Burmese Literary Commission to develop Burmese literature further. On the 5th of July 1975, the Printers and Publishers Central Registration Board, the main censorship board of the Home Ministry. 4 years earlier, the board had been a part of the Information Ministry, issued a statement to warn publishers to self-censor works, especially those criticizing the Burma Socialist Program Party, the government, pornographic writing and libel, undermining the principle of freedom of expression. Many contemporary works are of history and biographical accounts, because of strict government censorship beginning in the 1960s with the rule of Ne Win. Burmese literature has become subdued in many ways. By 1976, only 411 titles were published annually, compared to 1882, when 445 titles were published. Various factors, especially the lengthened bureaucratic process to obtain printing permits, censorship, and increasing economic hardship of consumers because of the socialist economic schemes, contributed to the decline of Burmese literary output. Popular novels have similar themes, often involving adventure, espionage, detective work, and romance. Many writers also translate Western novels, especially those of Arthur Haley and Harold Robbins. The flourishing translation sector is the result of the Burmese government, which did not sign the Universal Copyright Convention Agreement, which would have forced Burmese writers to pay royalties to the original writers. Short stories, often published in magazines, also enjoy tremendous popularity. They often deal with everyday life and have political messages, such as subtle criticisms of the capitalist system. Partly because, unlike novels, short stories are not censored by the Press Scrutiny Board, poetry is also a popular genre today, as it was during the monarchical times, but unlike novels and other works, which use literary Burmese, may use the vernacular instead of literary Burmese. This reform movement is led by left-leaning writers who believe lay means language. The vernacular and colloquial form of Burmese ought to be used instead of formal Burmese in literature. One of the greatest female writers of the post-colonial period is Journal Kai or Mamale. Kinmai Ochit was another important writer who wrote, among her works, The 13-Carat Diamond, 1955, which was translated into many languages. The journalist Luduyula was the author of numerous volumes of ethnic minority folklore, novels about inmates in New-era jails, and biographies of people working in different occupations. The Prime Minister Unu himself wrote several politically oriented plays and novels. Other prolific writers of the post-colonial era include Thine P. Mind and his The Ocean Traveller and the Pearl Queen, considered a Burmese classic. Maya the Ancient, known for his translations of Western classics like War and Peace. Thordasu and Mayatadun, distinguished female writers, who have also been an ever-present force in Burmese literary history, include Kiai, Kinhanan and San Sanwef. Part 4, Contemporary. In 2012, Bones Wilcrow, 15 Contemporary Burmese Poets, was published by ARC Publications, UK. It was edited by Coco Thet and James Byrne and featured poetry from Tin Mo, Thitsani, Orn Chimt, Mae, Morn Chonu, Morn Piet Min, Kinong I, Zia Lin, Morn Fine Zor, Mo Zor, Mo Wei, Coco Thet, Indra, Pandora and Morn Upai, and was published as part of ARC Publications Anthologies in Translation series and, later in 2013, by Northern Illinois University Press in the United States. This bilingual edition of poetry is regarded as the first anthology of modern Burmese poetry in the West. Part 5, Notable Writers. The journalist Luduyula, 1910 to 1982, was the author of numerous volumes of ethnic minority folklore, novels about inmates in New-era jails, and biographies of people working in different occupations. The Prime Minister Unu himself wrote several politically oriented plays and novels. Other writers who came of age prior to 1947 during the colonial era included Hamobi Saif Ain, 1862 to 1942, James Lakayor, 1866 to 1919, Uwadama, 1879 to 1939, Akin Kodormain, 1876 to 1964, P. Monin, 1883 to 1940, P. Monton, 1888 to 1973, Pokaya, 1891 to 1942, Thaipan Monwa, 1899 to 1942, Dagunkin Kinley, 1904 to 1981, Sayazorgi, 1907 to 1990, Atanorn, 1909 to 1978, Minthu 1, 1909 to 2004, Thukla, 1910 to 2005, Chitmorn, 1913 to 1945, Thine P. Mind, 1914 to 1978, who wrote the classic The Ocean Traveller and the Pearl Queen, Richard Bartholomew, 1926 to 1985, and Torfai Argale, 1926 to 2006. Younger authors who became well known in Burma include Orn Fin, born c. 1927, Maya the Ancient, 1929 to 1998, who was known for his translations of Western classics like War and Peace, Teketh or Phone Name, 1930 to 2002. Morn Shushin, c. 1932 to 2009. Tin Mo, 1933 to 2007. Nandath Ein Zan, 1947 to 2011. And Pascal Kuthlu, born 1967. Other well-known authors include Thordasu, Chitunayo, Mornkin Min, Danabu, and Saw Wai. Well-known Burmese historians include Sansipo, 1870 to 1946, Tenor, 1909 to 1978, Sao Se Mon, 1913 to 1987, Ba Shin, 1914 to 1971, Than Dun, 1923 to 2005, My Oma Mind Kau, born 1960, and Thant Mind You, born 1966. Distinguished female writers, who have also been an ever-present force in Burmese literary history, include Kiai Ludu Dor Amar, 1915 to 2008, Kin Anin Yu, 1925 to 2003, Aung San Suu Kyi, born 1945, Min Fong Ho, born 1951, Nonu Yi, born 1957, San San Wef, Jew, born 1958, Kin Kin Tu, born 1965, Ma Sandar, 1942 born, and Mi Chan Wai. One of the greatest female writers of the post-colonial period is Journal Kai or Mamale, 1917 to 1982. Kinmai Ochit, 1915 to 1999, was another important writer who wrote, among her works, The 13-Carat Diamond, 1955, which was translated into many languages. This recording is a derivative work from Wikipedia. For more information, please visit www.frogcast.org.